The Primarchs are not human, at least not any way we mortals can conceive. The Primarchs are beings created from the greatest of our species, the master of mankind, the Emperor, and the eldritch powers of the gods of chaos. So we have been told, and so have we been lied to, for the deal that the Emperor made with the ruinous powers was not for their might, but rather for their agreement, as a pact was made to break the order of the galaxy. For the Emperor would rip from the warp the very lords of the Immaterium, the gods of the warp, for his own Machiavellian deeds. But by using many sources and unveiling some hidden connections, we can finally answer, are the Primarchs vessels for warp gods? But what would make me say such a wild and outlandish thing? What on earth would make me think that the Primarchs are anything but the spawn of the Emperor and his alchemy? But that's the thing, it's not I who thinks this, it's the Primarchs. If you've read throughout the heresy, you know that time and time again, the Primarchs have come to terms with their reality, and it's a little bit wild to say the least. An unexpected side effect of having the entirety of the Great Crusade come crashing down in burning ruin is that the Primarchs had to think a lot about the Emperor, what it meant to be a Primarch and what the Imperium meant. Any and all veneer of the good united humanity came crashing down, and so too with it the idea of a good and benevolent Emperor. For if Horus had betrayed the Emperor, something was amiss. That something, as we know, was the existence of chaos, the warp, and everything around it. So all the Primarchs, be they loyalist or heretic, come to the same understanding and reasoning. The Emperor was hiding something. The Emperor was telling them the truth, so they need to try and figure it out for themselves. And like all children, when they realize that their parents are in fact fallible, their whole world was brought into question. But it wasn't just the rise of chaos and the beginning of the Horus heresy that caused the Primarchs to question. Some of the more thoughtful and introspective Primarchs already felt that something was a little off here and there. And this difference was keenly felt during teleportation. We have two examples, the first being Khan, taken from Scars. A chill raced through the Khan's body, just as it always did. For a fraction of a heartbeat, he had the half-awareness of being suspended over the chasm of infinity, the sensation that had always been oddly reassuring, as if it were where he truly belonged. Immediately this screams out that the Primarchs are far more used to the warp than we think they are. The Khan is someone who always wanted to be free. He craved freedom, and he was the one who arguably chafed the most underneath the weight of the Great Crusade. The only other option could be Corvus Corax, but for a completely different reason. The Khan is someone who needs freedom. He needs to be out there, he can't have anything weighing him down. And here we see that when he's in teleportation, when he's personally traveling in between the warp, no gale fields interfering between one or the other, he feels free. Oddly reassuring, it says, as if this is where he truly belongs. This immediately implies that when the Khan is free of his mortal coil, i.e. when his soul is traveling through the warp, because that's what teleportation is. It takes your body, it basically shoves it through the warp, and your soul at the same time, meaning that for a brief period, you are not connected to your physical form. Your soul is free in the warp. During this time, the Khan feels safe. Whereas most other people, when they experience warp travel via teleportation, they feel incredibly uneasy, incredibly burdened, and they just feel absolutely god-awful. The Khan, and we'll see soon with Guilliman, feel something completely different. Again, taken from the Dark Imperium. There was always a moment of enlightenment for Guilliman during teleportation, when he hung in a state that was neither life nor death. In these moments, when his soul straddled two worlds, he knew himself for what he truly was. Not a being of matter alone, but a creature of both realities. In those moments, he was convinced. No, he knew that he was spun from the warp stuff and matter both, though the feeling faded and became absurd after his deliverance to his destination. At the time it was profound, as if understanding of the mysteries of creation awaited his discovery, if he had but the courage to look a little deeper. Again, we get a much more detailed explanation of this. And here we can see that Guilliman basically all but confirms like, hey, I am not just a normal Primarch. I am not just a normal human. I am not someone bound by material realm. Something at my very core essence is related to the warp. Now yes, this doesn't refer to the fact that the Emperor used warp magic to help create the Primarchs. But the question is, what warp magic? Because as we'll get on later in the video, we know for a fact that it wasn't chaotic related, but it was something different. But then that begs the question, we know that there are indeed warp entities other than the Chaos Gods, but aren't they all malicious? And here's the thing, they're not. The origins of the warp originated as the realm of souls, that being what the Old Ones created to essentially be heaven. We know that due to the war in heaven and the subsequent birth of Slanesh and the advent of chaos, it then turned into the warp as we know it, that being mostly a chaotic faction, a place where the realms of chaos dominate. But there are still a few pockets of warp that are untouched. We also know that the veil between the real world and the warp world wasn't always as strong as we think it is. We know for a fact that the elves had a hand in this, where Sirion after Cain nearly destroyed the entire Eldar race because of a prophecy that said that he might get killed by one of them, decided to separate the mortal veil from the divine, i.e. separate the warp from the real world. But he was only one person who did this, and because of this, and the weakening of the Eldar after that, it's not exactly as solid as he would have liked, and there are some places where that veil is rather thin. Moloch being a perfect example, Prospero being another, but one that people often overlook is Fenris. Now we all know the memes of Fenris being, oh, they're not psyches, it's earth magic and all that rubbish. And most of us are smart enough to realize that, yeah, no, this is actually just plain old warp nonsense. It's not warp nonsense as we think. The answer actually lies somewhere in the middle. The wolves are indeed drawing on from the power of the warp, but it's not from the roiling warp. It's from a specific warp source, that being the warp of Fenris. Because we know for a fact, Fenris has its own entities regarding it. The veil between Fenris and the warp is incredibly thin. We know of 2 confirmed places where the veil is so thin, it is stabilized enough to become a portal. That being the Gate of Mordkai, which pretty much houses some type of demonic entity. And then we have the Strix Door, which we see during the novel Wolfsbane, Leman Russ uses to travel into the Underverse, the so-called name for the warp that the Fenrisians have. And there he meets a warp deity, known as the Earl King. How do we know he's a warp deity? It's basically all but stated in the book that he has the presence of the warp taint in him. He is of the warp, but he's not chaotic. He bears none of the 8-pointed stars, nor does he have anything to do with the other 4 chaos gods. He's a pure warp entity, and he's non-chaotic. Basically, during Wolfsbane, Russ wants to figure out a way to kill Horus. So, he performs an old ritual that gets into there, and he makes a deal with the Earl King. If he can complete his challenges, the Earl King will give him his wisdom. After a whole rigmarole of all that nonsense he then meets himself. But it's him if he hadn't landed on Fenris. He notes that while his soul is still similar, there is something different about it. He doesn't have the fang-like teeth and he's missing a lot of the charm and charisma that Fenris breeds. But basically they have a conversation that goes back there and there, until Russ realizes this fake Russ holds the Spear of Russ, the gift that the Emperor gave him, forged by his own hand. And the fake Russ states this explicitly, saying that this weapon contains part of the Emperor, part of his soul, it contains his wisdom and his knowledge. And, just like with Warden of the Old Age, all knowledge has price. I will perform my duty, as is in my oath and my bond.
The loyal hound as always.
I do this freely, of my own accord.
Then know thyself, Leman Russ,
and take possession fully of the gifts your father gave you. As fast as a striking lindworm, the false Russ drove the spear into Leman Russ's primary heart. Flesh baked in disruptive fires, bones shattered, the organ was obliterated. Grungnir, however, was not done, but continued on, bursting forth from Russ's back, transfixing him on the shaft. The leaf-headed blade was black in gore in the moonlight, steaming cooked blood.
Wisdom hurts, doesn't it?
Said the false Russ. His savage glee mimicked Russ's own battle joy.
Your brother was a wolf, so this spear is his bane. But you are also a wolf, and it will cut you all too, all in the same way. As you said, his gift cuts both ways.
The false Russ yanked the spear free. Russ sank to his knees. Somehow, he lived. Though one of his hearts was dead, the other beat unsurely. A gaping wound had been punched through his body. Blood poured from his chest in red cat tracks. That was not the worst part of the Primarch's injuries, however. The most terrible wound had been cut in his soul, and the burning salt of knowledge rubbed into it. He knew. He knew what he was. He knew what all the Primarchs were. His face was numb. Cold rushed his limbs. Wide eyes, he looked up to the face of his killer. So familiar, yet so different.
What are we?
He said, though he knew full well, and his soul shriveled in the fires of revelation. How could our father have brought us into this world? How could he have made us?
As your brother Magnus found, knowledge always has a price. You wish to know, and now you do. The price for the spear's awakening is your own. This knowledge will torment you forever, and eventually it will chase you from your home. But know this, Leman of the Russ. You only need wound your brother with this spear to remind the War Master that he is Horus Lupercal, son of the Emperor, and not the puppet of chaos. The rest will follow.
Thus enlightened, Leman Russ fell dead in the snow. So this basically all but confirms that the Primarchs are something completely different. Whatever was revealed to Russ, it scared the ever-living hell out of him. Russ, one of the most loyal sons of all the Emperor, was shaken to his very core. Not in anger, not in wrath, but in abject fear and horror. Russ was scared, terribly mortified at what had been revealed to him. We know for a fact that it revolves around how they were made. And as we know, the Primarchs were not creative of chaos. They, however, were creative of the warp, meaning that whatever Russ found out is in relation to the warp, but not chaos. This is further reinforced by the false Russ, that when he says that when Horus is stabbed by this spear, a spear of the Emperor, which is very important, it contains part of the Emperor's soul, part of his craft, part of his knowledge and his wisdom, and basically his whole genetic code on a soul level and physical level. He will be reminded that he is Horus Lupercal, son of the Emperor, not puppet of chaos. He will be reminded that he is of the Emperor, not of chaos. And as we know, the Emperor is of the warp, but he's not of chaos, meaning that whatever the Emperor used to make his sons follows the same recipe of the warp, but not of chaos. But also, what we really need to look into here is the fact that this happens on Fenris. As I mentioned, Fenris is one of those places where the warp and reality have a thin veil, meaning that not only is it easy for the warp to interact with the mortal realm, what we get from it is going to be the most accurate. Leman Russ interacting with the false Russ and the Earl King, the idea that mortal men can interact with beings of the warp is something that happens regularly on Fenris, meaning that the connection is not only stable, it is continuously stable, making it more than likely that Fenris is a planet that is tied directly to the warp, a la Caliban or Prospero. This means that this information is more than likely accurate, as we know that planets like Prospero and Caliban have their own relation to the warp, and again, it's something generally speaking outside the realm of chaos, meaning that chaos doesn't really have an easy time infiltrating it, which then further gives credence to the fact that this information here is pretty solid. But if all that wasn't enough, we can see that in the 41st millennium, the truth has finally been made reality, and at least two of the sons of the Emperor know what they really are. Now, of course, talking about everyone's favorite encounter between Lorgar Aurelian, the Urzan, Primarch of the Wordbearers, and Corvus Corax, Shadow Lord of the Raven Guard, taken from Shadow of the Past.
My Lord Aurelian, forgive my weakness. A creature of demonic spite has disrupted the great works here.
I see, no demon. Kalta'a grants back towards his brothers. The entity that had pursued them reached the top of the hill. Amidst a storm of multiplier, it cast aside legionaries with sweeps of glittering claws, leaving tattered remains draped across the stonework of the outer shrine. This is no demon. Lorgar raised his rod, beckoning the blood-stained whirlwind tearing through the last of the Dark Apostles' warriors. Come to me, brother. With a last flurry of activity, what turned another legionary into shards of ceramite and ribbons of flesh, the apparition concealed into a recognizable figure. It was of an equal height to the demon Primarch, clad in black battleplate, with long talon gauntlets. A pair of wings stretched from its ornate backpack, fashioned as intricate metal raven feathers. The face was as pale as snow, gaunt with eyes dark as coal, framed by shoulder-length black hair. Kalta'a felt his dying breath in his lungs as he looked up to the unmistakable features of Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard. A flurry of questions flooded through his thoughts, but all remained unanswered as Corax spoke.
What has happened to you, brother?
I have ascended, said Lorgar. He indicated Corax with a twitch of his rod. I might ask the same of you. The Raven Lord strode forwards, intent on Lorgar Aurelian. Kalta'a and his warriors scattered before him, grateful to be free of his wrath. Marduk and his courtier closed about their Primarch, but a look sent them away.
I am what I always have been. I am vengeance incarnate. I am justice delivered. This place, beyond the veil, has revealed what we all are, underneath the veneer of humanity that our Father created for us. We are of the warp.
Have you come to make oath to the powers that are your true creator?
No. I have sworn to destroy all chaos taint in the galaxy. You will be the first fallen brother to die beneath my blades.
I am not the creature you fought at Istavan, said Lorgar, raising his mace.
Nor am I.
Keltar barely followed the lunge of Corax, so swift it was. A black wind threw him aside as dark fire crackled from the rod of Lorgar, with a thunderous shockwave that hurled the word bearers to the ground. The two demigods clashed. One of my favorite exit scripts taken from all of 40k books, and many's favorite. Not only do you see Lorgar get absolutely bent over by a pissed off Birdman, we basically all but confirmed that, yeah, the Primarchs are of the warp. They are base of the warp. Their souls are created from the warp. They are not of modern humanity. The Emperor, when he made them, he took something from the warp, something that was not chaos, and he used it to create his sons. Hence why he couldn't just recreate them when they were lost or when they turned against him. Whatever the Emperor created, he could not replace it. But then that begs the question, what on earth was it? It wasn't chaos related, but it was of the warp. Quite simply, it was gods. Alright, so I know that's one hell of a wild thing just to throw out there, but if we look at this, we see that it actually makes a great deal of sense. I'm then going to use 3 Primarchs as examples that we basically have all but confirmed that they're in relations to gods, with one of them, being Sanguinius, confirmed. And this was confirmed in Mephiston, Blood and Darkness. Mephiston is going through the process of becoming a Primarch Marine, and he enters into this weird pseudo-psychic state, like most Space Marines do when they undergo this operation. But what's unique about Mephiston is that when he undergoes this, he ends up talking to a bloody angel, one that he doesn't really understand, and it reveals to him the true nature of the Blood Angels. As such, the bloody angel nodded. What do you see in the sky? I see 2 angels at war, one of gold, one of darkness. They have been at war forever, even before your kind came to Baal. Those who dwelled here in distant epochs, they knew the angels of gold and black, though they did not see them as you see them. He gestured at a space between 2 of the outer pillars. An image appeared there, presenting Mephiston with a vision of a spindly Xenos, heavily robed and bedecked in bloodstone, laboring to raise monuments long since ground to dust. And there, where millions of years later, men lived in brief paradise upon Baal Indicus and Baal Fortuna. The first men here knew the angels too, but refused to believe they existed, until times changed, and they let the Black Angel in. Mephiston looked through the phantasmal angels. Both moons were present in the sky. Both were living. Baal Secundus sparkled with green-blue oceans. Baal Primus was drier, mottled with biomes of soft greens and greys. Around Primus was a complex of orbital stations so extensive and radiant it resembled a necklace. The moons no longer bear those names, said Mephiston. Names come and go. Those names became corrupted in form. In time, they will be completely forgotten. As will your species. Another race, then another will come and uncover the things left behind in days long dead, and wonder what manner of hands shaped them. The bloody angel turns his attention back to Mephiston. Or the universe will fall to chaos, and yours will be the loss of creation's children, and no more beings will choose their path twixt grace and rage, but all will be madness, and pandemonium will reign. Here we have a direct confirmation that the nature of the Blood Angels is tied to ancient eldritch deities, and the Blood Angels are just the latest in a line of succession to said deities. So now you may be saying, okay Brad, this is in relation to the Black Rage. Therefore, this is in relation to when Sanguinius died via Horus. Could it be possible that Horus, when he stabbed Sanguinius, managed to transfer some warp nonsense into him? Thus, it doesn't necessarily mean that this was inherently their nature, but it could have become it via corruption. And that's actually a very plausible theory, except we have this part from Darkness and Blood that directly contradicts it. My lord Sanguinius, I am sorry. The vision of the Primarchs smiled sadly down upon him. The angels blurred, they faded, and the last spectres of them were drawn within the Primarch's being. I am not Sanguinius. Sanguinius is dead. This directly confirms that Sanguinius was the original inheritor of both the Black and the Gold Angels. Sanguinius was the vessel of this warp god, the Angels, one of black, one of gold, forever fighting. Thus they were combined into the Red Angel, a vessel for them both, the Primarch Sanguinius, son
of the Emperor. But whereas some of you might think, okay, this is the exception to the rule, you know, the Blood Angels are special, not so. We go back to Leman Russ. When Leman Russ, during Wolfsbane, is speaking with False Russ, he sees False Russ as him without being on Fenris. He's still very much Russ, but he's missing some of the key mutations. We know for a fact that when Leman Russ is on Fenris, Fenris's veil with the warp and the real world is so incredibly thin that there are stable portals that lead in and out of it. Fenris impacted Russ, but it was always meant to. We know that the Canis Helix, the unique gene seed of the Sway Souls from Russ, was specifically created with certain parameters in mind. Now you take a look at Fenris. Fenris is known for its wolves, and it's known for its gods. People often say that Fenris was perfect with Leman Russ, but that's not the case. Leman Russ was perfect for Fenris. Leman Russ was made to be the vessel of the gods of Fenris. Fenris is one of the unique planets in the Imperium, where the veil is so thin that it can be an independent player. The planet spawned its own entities, and those entities needed a chief, a wolf king, a warden, a god king, a lord of all of Fenris. Lo and behold, you bring in Leman Russ, perfectly made to be the perfect exemplar of a god king of old. Leman Russ was created by the Emperor to be the god king of Fenris, or to be the inhabitant avatar of that being. This is further reinforced because when we see that false Leman meets real Leman, the only thing different about them is the physical mutations caused by Leman being so close to the warp on Fenris. Everything else is the same. Everything else. And that is very important. The soul of Leman Russ is still the same. Leman Russ fits far too well in the mythology of Fenris to simply just be a coincidence. And that is a trend that all Primarchs tend to fall on. And then finally, we have Corvus Corax. Corvus is basically the easiest example. He's become what he was supposed to be. He has been elevated into a creature of the warp, a denizen, but he's not chaotic. But then that begs the question, what god does Corvus Corax inhabit? In the warp and in Warhammer 40k, we see time and time again whenever a pantheon is mentioned, there is always a few entities that are pretty common. One is the God King, there's usually a Maiden of Fate, and there is someone who comes to fuck everything up. But there's also another, a god of justice. And this god of justice is either bedecked in one of two ways. Clad in golden gilded armor, the right hand holding a flaming sword, or it is clad in sable blackness, darkness, being the Reaper, he who comes to collect. And that's very important, because an aspect of justice is rendering it unto those who have committed crimes, i.e., those who have incurred a debt to society and to the order of the world. You owe a debt to the order of the world. The Grim Reaper will come and collect. Thus, Corvus Corax is a representation of every single aspect of shadow-cloaked justice. The most common example we have is the Nightbringer. Now, the Nightbringer exists in pretty much every other mythology. He's the Grim Reaper, but he is said to be the most powerful because he is the one who comes reaping debts. Now, well, yes, the idea of justice in a Catan may seem a little odd. Everyone follows a rule of order. The only people who don't are Chaos, and even they have their own rules. The Eldar reference Cain also as being a Grim Reaper. He who harvests souls, he who claims debt. Again, Meulen Ra being the most prime example of that, with him being the Phoenix Lord of that aspect of Cain. Throughout the entirety of human history, the idea that there is a vengeful justice, a black cloak figure that comes reaping debt, has existed for time immemorial. And here's the kicker. The way that the warp works is that when you offer a prayer or a thought into the warp, it slowly manifests itself into reality. When you consider that there have been concepts of the Grim Harbinger, he who claims debt, justice, sable-clad justice, has existed since the time of the Old Ones, and we consider that how much humanity has poured into it and how strong our psychic connection to the warp is, it is incredibly possible that a god of sable justice, a god of vengeance was created. Again, we know in our own pantheons, god of vengeance is very common. So there is a god of vengeance. And who better to inhabit that than the Primarch of justice himself? And who better to be the vessel for such a god than the Raven Lord of justice incarnate? These are only 3 examples. I could go through all 20 Primarchs, well, 18.
and give you an example of a god that they could be part of. Some of them are confirmed, some of them are a bit more speculated. But hey, let me know if you guys want me to do that. But with all that said, let's put all this together. The Primarchs themselves often questioned what they were. They knew that they weren't human. But it wasn't a case that they were genetically created to be beyond that. There was something completely different on them on a soul level, on an intimate level. Their very being was not of the mortal realms. Their very being was of the warp. This has been confirmed time and time again, with every single Primarch experiencing roughly the same feeling, processing it in different ways. So we know for a fact, the Primarchs are of the warp. They are beings from the warp. They are not from the mortal realms. But most importantly, we know that they're not from Chaos. The Chaos gods are the chief gods of the warp, but they're not the only gods of the warp. When the Emperor was on Meulen, when he got help from them, most people assume he got power from the Chaos gods. But that's not the case, because we know for a fact, the Emperor and the Primarchs are not of Chaos. The Emperor is being directly quoted as being anathema, completely opposite and the antithesis of Chaos. That is confirmed. So too are his sons. Again, we have it confirmed in many book sources that the Primarchs, while they're of the warp, they are most definitely not of Chaos. That is a massive point that is made again and again and again. They are different. We then know that whatever the Emperor used to create them, he could not replicate. The Emperor was many things, but he was certainly not lazy, and he certainly was not above going through even greater lengths to get what he needed to get something done. This means that whatever the Emperor used to create the Primarchs could not be replicated via any means, be they of the Chaos Gods or himself. We then know for a fact that many different Primarchs have eerily close relations to gods, one being Sanguinius, directly confirmed to be a vessel of a warp god, where he is directly stated to be a vessel for the Angels of Baal, the black and the gold, with him becoming the third, the red, a combination of the both, something that's then passed on to his sons. Then you take a look at other Primarchs. We mentioned Leman Russ and Corvus Corax in this one. Very, very easy to see what type of gods they be based off of. You put all this together, we come to the undeniable conclusion that the soul of the Primarchs is indeed based in the warp, and it is not based on the Chaos Gods. And thus, my theory is as such. The Emperor took the remaining gods of the warp, those who were not Chaos, and he implanted their essence, part of their soul, into his sons. He made his sons avatars of these deities. Thus would they gain power unrivaled. But it was not only in an effort to gain power, it was also in an effort to control them. Corvus Corax and the Khan both mention that when they are in their physical form, they feel shackled. But when the Khan is traveling through teleportation, he feels free. When Corvus Corax is in the warp with Logar, he outright states, "I am what I was supposed to be, unshackled by the veneer of humanity crafted by our father." The Emperor used his sons as vessels to not only draw power from these gods, but to keep them under wraps. The Emperor is a control freak, everyone knows that. It's what drove his own followers away, a la the Perpetuals. So it makes sense for the Emperor to do a twofold plan, to not only draw on power from warp deities, deities which are like him and the Chaos Gods, but also keep them in check. Not only is he using them for his own ends, he's making sure they can't be used against him. All in all this put together with all this evidence, I can say with utmost certainty that the Primarchs are indeed vessels for warp gods. But then that begs the question, what on God's good green earth does that mean for the rest of the Imperium? And what happens if those gods don't like their vessels? But that's another story for another day. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you guys thought about it down below. And comment down below, do you guys want me to do more Primarchs? I could probably do like a big video where I cover all remaining other like 15 of them. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I want to say massive thank you guys for watching. Even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Massive shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Curtis Studies, Mr. Eddie B3, and Miss Majora the Void. Massive shout out to the good old NCOs of the Sergeants, with Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Mooresmith Fireheart, Mr. Sean IRL7, Mr. Bullwin, and Mr. Matthew Merrill. Big shout out to my corporal tier members, with Mr. Tremeo the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Miss Shauna Smithers, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Gentle Salamander, Mr. Rambling Hamster, and the Wench of Warhammer. And finally, but certainly not least, the awesome privateer, with Mr. Thomas Oslons, Mr. Ivan _SBW, Mr. Michael Aeda, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. CMD Neo, Mr. Fortress Unum, Mr. Dalmaric, Eric Massaro, and Mr. Weaselhack. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. Sign up today with our memberships. You get a bunch of awesome benefits, early access videos, behind the scenes stuff, member-only content, and of course you get to help out your boy and make these videos come out good and dandy as they are. But remember, this will always be free, and your boy will love you whether you give me $1 or not. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Rally 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. Y'all sure you stay strong out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers! Gilliman, the god of analytics. That is a thing, by the way.